Hello everyone. I am Emily, 32 years old. In this video, I want to share with you a story from my life. A story about mistakes, weakness, and the painful consequences it brings. I used to have a happy family, a wonderful husband, but just because of a moment of weakness, I took the wrong step and that broke everything. The story began when I met my ex-lover. Even though I was married, I couldn't resist my feelings when I saw him again. He reconnected and I forgot everything I had. But then when my husband found out, everything collapsed in just a moment. I not only lost my family, but also my ex-lover. I tell this story not to ask for forgiveness, but to tell those who are facing similar temptations, be alert and think carefully. Don't let a moment of weakness destroy your whole life. If you are lost, I hope you come back before it's too late. Now, please join me in my own story. The story begins when I met Ben, my ex-lover, after many years of no contact. We used to love each other so passionately, as if nothing could stop that feeling. In the afternoons of college, we walked by the lake talking endlessly about our dreams, about the future, clumsy kisses under the streetlights, promises that at that time I believed would last forever. But then, like a whirlwind, everything gradually changed. We were no longer the two innocent people of the early days of life. Differences in opinions and endless arguments pushed us apart. In the end, we broke up, each taking with us a piece of memory and unspoken words. After breaking up with Ben, I met Mark. He was completely different from Ben, mature, steady and calm. He took care of me, loved me in a way that I thought I needed. And Mark chose a stable and peaceful life. We got married, had a small family with Chloe, our 4-year-old daughter. Ben gradually became a thing of the past, a vague memory that I still occasionally thought about, but had peacefully left behind. In the old years, however, a part of me always felt that Ben was an unforgettable memory. Every time I thought about him, a vague, indescribable feeling arose. We couldn't keep that love, but I still can't deny that Ben was once an important part of my life. A part that is not easy to erase. It seems that he still exists somewhere in my thoughts. In the evenings, when I sit quietly, wondering if I regret what happened. One day, when I was sitting by the window in my office, my phone suddenly rang. This time, it was a message from Ben. He said that he had returned to London after many years living abroad, and he wanted to see me once. My first feeling was a strange confusion. My heart suddenly stirred, as if a part of the past that I thought was sleeping had now awakened. I hesitated for a long time, not knowing whether to meet him or not. The feeling of wanting to reunite, and being afraid of what would happen, made me think a lot. But in the end, curiosity, the desire to see again, the person who was an important part of my life, I agreed. I didn't know what I was looking for when I decided to meet him. But I knew one thing for sure: this meeting would never be the same again. The day I met Ben again, I felt like everything had changed, and yet not changed at all. He was no longer the young man with the innocent smile that I used to know. But that look, that smile still had a strange attraction. Still made my heart beat a little faster. He was still tall, still had the confident look that I used to love. Although there had been some changes over time, it was just that now he seemed more mature, more steady, but to me, he was still that man, the one I loved, even though it had been a long time. We sat across from each other in the familiar coffee shop, where we used to date when we were students. At this moment, the atmosphere between us seemed to be filled with questions, things that had not been said. He started with gentle questions about my current life, about work, about family. I answered him, feeling like I was trying to keep everything at a safe level. not wanting to let my emotions overwhelm my reason. But gradually, we fell into old stories. Memories that we had experienced together, long trips, winter evenings when we were wrapped up in each other, hasty kisses before partying. Those stories were like a river flowing through time, bringing us back to those days. And then suddenly, I realized that in each of those stories, there were still emotions that I could not deny. It felt like everything was coming back. Like I was standing between choices that had never been made, with a part of the past that could not be shaken off. The meetings after that became more regular. At first, I just thought they were normal meetings between two old friends. But gradually, I realized that things were not that simple. Every time Ben smiled, every time his eyes met mine, an indescribable feeling arose within me. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in years. A feeling as if I was reliving long-forgotten emotions. He was still the same, with a warm smile and confident eyes. Every time he looked at me, I felt an irresistible attraction, as if everything around me faded away. Leaving only him and me, our stories became closer. Our conversations lasted longer, not just casual greetings, but deep sharing about life, about memories, about what was lost. And when he recounted old memories, I couldn't help but realize that in every word, in every gesture, Ben still retained everything I loved about him. The sincerity, the warmth, and the intense desire he had for me. Something inside me seemed to be awakened, a part of the emotion that I thought had been dormant for so long. Even though I knew clearly that this was wrong, that I was betraying what I had, I couldn't stop. Every time I saw him, I found myself more and more drawn into that intoxicating feeling. I began to realize that I was looking for something in Ben that I no longer saw in Mark. Mark was a wonderful person. He loved me, cared for me, was a caring husband and father. But it seemed that in all of that, I was missing an important part of myself. He gave me stability, security, but Ben gave me something different: excitement, freedom, and a passion that I had long forgotten. Even though I knew it was wrong, I couldn't help but reach out to him whenever I had the chance, as if I was trying to find a part of myself that had long been forgotten. I couldn't forget that feeling. No matter how hard I tried to erase it, every time I thought about the moments with Ben, those feelings would come back stronger than ever. One night, after Mark had gone to bed, I couldn't resist the urge. A feeling I couldn't explain. I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway. We made an appointment, just a simple evening. A few drinks, a chat. But when I sat with him, everything seemed to go back to the way it used to be. Stories about life, about changes over the years, about old memories made me forget about time. Every word Ben said seemed to pull me back to the past. Like taking me into a world where there was only him and me, where Mark was not present, where I was not a wife, a mother, but only Emily, the girl I once loved passionately. It felt so strange, as if I was reliving the sweet days of my youth. Stories from the old days. As if there had never been a separation. As if we had never been apart. And then, for some reason, I kissed him. A hasty kiss, but full of desire. Full of long-forgotten emotions. All reason, all inhibitions disappeared in that moment. For the first time in my life, I betrayed Mark, the husband I had promised to be with for the rest of my life. Immediately after, a wave of guilt came crashing down. I felt like a traitor. As if everything I had built with Mark suddenly became meaningless. Images of him, of my daughter Chloe, suddenly appeared in my mind. I blamed myself, feeling like I had lost everything because of a moment of weakness. But then a part of me felt like I had found a part of myself again. An emotion that I had not felt for a long time. It was the freedom, the intensity, The feeling of living with myself that I thought I had lost for a long time. I couldn't shake off the guilt, but I also couldn't deny that it brought me something indescribable. And in that moment, I could only feel that I was standing between two worlds, unable to turn back and unable to move forward. The next morning, I couldn't look Mark in the eye. It felt like there was an invisible wall between us, preventing me from facing him. He came home late like every day, walking in the door looking tired. But today there was something different in the way he looked at me. That look unlike the affectionate, caring eyes I had received. It was cold and silent, as if he was searching for something but didn't know how to say it. I didn't dare to speak, didn't dare to ask him anything. The unusually heavy atmosphere enveloped the room. Mark put down his bag, then walked into the kitchen, making some strange movements as if to hide his tension. I just sat there, head bowed, not daring to look at him, because I knew in my heart that he had realized something. We didn't say anything to each other, but this silence was heavier than any words that could be said. I felt guilty, like there was a shadow weighing down on my mind, making it hard for me to breathe. Last night, what I had done haunted me, wrapped tightly in every thought, every small movement of mine. The mixed emotions could not be dispelled. I did not dare to face Mark, did not dare to look into his eyes for fear that there would be doubt, disappointment that I could not explain. I had betrayed him, and I knew that no matter how many reasons or explanations I had, I could not get back what I had lost. In that quiet space, I did not know what to do but keep silent, as if I said nothing, there would be nothing to face, nothing to admit. But deep down, I knew everything had changed. Our relationship was no longer the same. No matter how hard I tried to hide it, I still couldn't erase that change. A few days later, when I was sitting in the living room, the atmosphere between Mark and I was still heavy. Everything was like a thick fog. Every word, every gesture was heavy, as if we were standing on the brink of a change that I couldn't back down from. Suddenly, Mark walked into the room. His eyes were still cold as usual. He said nothing, just silently took my phone from the table. I felt like I was frozen instantly. I couldn't react, just watched his fingers slide across the screen. He wasn't in a hurry, not angry. Every time he stopped, his eyes swept over me, but no questions were asked. I felt his silence as a heavier accusation than any words. We kept looking at each other, but no one spoke, no one dared to speak. I knew, clearly, that he was flipping through the messages between me and Ben. The conversations that I had tried to keep secret. Sweet words, promises, emotional back and forth, conversations that I thought I could only keep in my heart. Each message was like a betrayal, a deep wound in my heart. When I saw his eyes, I realized that he knew everything without a question. Without an explanation, I knew that everything was exposed. Guilt overwhelmed me, and I felt like I was standing in front of a mirror, looking at myself and at the person I didn't recognize, the person who had hurt the person I loved. Everything suddenly shattered before my eyes, like a picture being torn into pieces. The whole space in the living room suddenly became small and suffocating. I wanted to say something to apologize, but no words came out because I knew that no matter what I said, things could never go back. Mark didn't scream, didn't make a fuss, but his silence made me feel like I had been stripped of everything. He wasn't angry, there was no hysteria or destruction like I imagined. He just stood there, silent, and everything around him suddenly became terrifyingly quiet. He took my phone, scrolled through the messages, but I felt every heavy moment as if every time he read another line, the distance between us widened. When he finally looked looking at me with eyes that weren't angry but cold as ice. I felt my heart shatter. He only said one sentence, his voice deep but full of pain. "Emily, you betrayed me. You are no longer someone I can trust." Those words were like knives stabbing into my heart. Not because he shouted, not because he made a fuss, but because I could feel the pain in every word he said. He didn't need to cry, didn't need to scream, but his gaze, like a sharp knife, cut into the peace we had built. He looked at me not with the eyes of a loving husband, but a man who was losing the most precious thing in his life. He looked at me with disappointment, as if I was a completely different person, someone he no longer recognized. I stood there not knowing what to do. The apology couldn't escape my throat, because I knew clearly what I had done was unforgivable. I had betrayed him not just once, but a gradual process, little by little, until I couldn't go back anymore. Both of us were silent, no one said anything more. Each of us was lost in our own thoughts, and I felt the space around us shrink. This silence, heavy and painful, stretched on, and no words could break it. I sat there, my heart empty and heavy. Every word was meaningless. All that remained was the terrible silence between us, as if the whole world had collapsed, and nothing could be done to save it. The next day, when I returned home from work, the atmosphere in the house was the same as usual, but strangely quiet. Everything seemed frozen, time seemed to stand still. Mark was no longer there, the house was quiet. No sound of him talking, no sound of his footsteps passing by. I walked into the room, the space was the same. But a cold feeling immediately invaded me. He was gone. I found the divorce papers on the table without a signature, but I knew clearly that it was his decision. He didn't say anything, didn't leave a message, just silence. The words on the white paper were like the clearest confirmation. Everything was over, I felt like I was empty. Like I was left in the middle of the storm that I had created. Every reason, every explanation no longer had any meaning. I could only look at that paper, feeling my heart tighten with each beat. When I looked for him, he was gone. He was not home, there were no angry words or curses. There was no argument, no hateful words echoed in the air. Just a terrifying silence, like a deep cut in my heart. He did not need to say anything more. His silence was like a final declaration. He could not live with me anymore. I tried to think of what I could do to stop him, but deep down I knew I had no right to keep him. I had betrayed his trust, broken what we had built over the years. I couldn't ask for his forgiveness, couldn't call him back because I knew I didn't deserve it. A feeling of emptiness enveloped me. Everything suddenly fell apart. Not because of a big argument, not because of a tantrum, but because of a silence and unspoken end. And I could only stand there, watching the things I once loved slowly disappear, unable to do anything to stop it. After the divorce, I looked for Ben, but he didn't answer me. I called him, texted him, tried to contact him in every way I knew, but there was no word from him. I could do nothing but stare at my phone, where my messages fell into silence. Ben didn't want anything more with me. I could feel it in every minute of no response. In the distance, he deliberately created. Actually, I understood why. He was not the solution to the mistakes I had made. What I had done could not be fixed by an old relationship, by the old feelings that I had thought were important. I had thought that if I went back to Ben, I could find something to fill the void in my heart. But now I knew that was an illusion. I had lost Mark, my wonderful husband. He was the man I had loved and cherished, the man I had chosen to be my life partner. But I could not go back to the past, could not fix what had been done. Even if I wanted to, I could not. This feeling was unbearable. I wanted to apologize to him, to make things go back to the way they were. But I knew that betrayal could not be easily forgiven. Mark was not the only one who had been hurt. I had hurt myself too. Now, sitting in the empty house, I could feel the loneliness enveloping me. Everything around me was silent, leaving only the sound of myself, of the empty thoughts in my head. Every corner of the room, every object in the house reminded me of the old days. The days when I still had a family, still had people who loved me. But now, everything was shattered, like broken pieces of glass scattered everywhere, unable to be repaired. I wondered if I could heal these wounds. Could I find peace, trust, and a little love within myself after all that had happened? But then I realized that this was not simple. My wounds were too deep, too big to heal overnight. And I had no one to rely on. I had destroyed everything, not just my family, but myself. Everything I had believed in. Everything I had collapsed under the betrayal I had caused. And now I was left alone facing the emptiness of my wrong choices. There was no one to blame. No one to blame. Just me in the silence of the empty house, with the broken pieces of my own life. Through this story, I want to advise you: never gamble with trust in a relationship. Sometimes we think that one mistake won't hurt. But the truth is, the smallest decisions can lead to consequences we never expected. If you are in a relationship, always remember that honesty and respect are indispensable elements. 1. Betrayal can destroy everything. And when everything is collapsed, you will realize that nothing is more important than maintaining trust and true love. This story is not only about betrayal, but also a reminder that the price of deception is never worth what you lose. Don't let weakness and temporary emotions destroy the strong and happy relationships you have built. Finally, remember that if you are wrong, don't hide or try to justify. Face the truth and learn to make things right. Only when you admit your mistakes and learn to forgive yourself can you move on and rebuild what has been lost.
Yeah.